What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. This is Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net. Today we're going to be talking about astrology for tweens with the author of the Junior Astrologers Handbook, a brand new book, Nikki Van De Kar. But first, I want to give you some insight into what's coming in August. We are moving into worker bee mode this month, and this is going to be especially strong from the 11th to the 15th. You might have noticed the shift just a few days ago, but all of the inner planets, starting on the 11th, all the inner planets are going to be in Virgo at once. Right now, Venus and Mars are there, and Mars is how we use our action. So these two planets are inclining all of us to be very practical, to improve, to clean things up, to clean. I actually got on my hands and knees and scrubbed my kitchen floor with a wire brush. Perhaps you have done something like that. And trust me, this is abnormal behavior for me. So there's this energy out there we can harness easily to evaluate, to be discerning, to critique, to look at things and measure not once, not twice, but probably 4 or 5 times and cut once. In the midst of all this, while we are being highly practical and tweaking and moving forward on all kinds of things, and also have a newfound awareness of boundaries and hygiene and distances from people, we're in a minefield of plot twists and sudden shifts and breakthroughs, as we also navigate a weird landscape of cautions and walls and obstacles and demands that we act like adults. And the lightning fields are coming as the inner planets contact Uranus, which is the radical change agent. This is really strong in the first week of August, leading up to the Leo new moon, which is on the 8th. Uranus and Saturn, who's the god of adulting, basically. The moon joins the little clash that these two have had all year and essentially break us out of confinement, at least in terms of our attitudes about ourselves. And then the Aquarius full moon at the end of the month finishes the process in a huge way, because bigger is better. Jupiter will be with the moon. He slid back into the sign of Aquarius, where he will be for the rest of the year. He does not enter Pisces until the winter holidays. And in the middle of all of this, our social mode changes. We get a little bit of a lightening of the worker bee syndrome in the middle of the month on the 15th, when the planet that rules our interactions, Venus, moves into the sign of Libra, which is one of her homes. And everyone wants to try to play nice, try to get along. We're interested in being conciliatory and at least using nice language. I'm guessing that greeting card sales are going to go up during this. And Mercury joins her there August 28th. Mercury, the planet of communication, moves into Libra at the very end of the month and sets up his last retrograde of the year, which will happen at the end of September. You can learn all about this in my forecast for August, which is up at Om Times, and also my site, EmpowermentUnlimited.net. So, and now for something of interest to anybody who has any child out in their life, including their inner child, since this is Leo Moon Week. I am very pleased that we have with us Nikki Van De Kar, who she's a blogger, mother, writer, crafter, and lover of all things mystical. She's the author of 10 books on magic and crafting, including Practical Magic and The Junior Witch's Handbook. And she's the founder of 2 popular knitting blogs. She lives with her family in Hawaii, and her latest book is The Junior Astrologer's Handbook. So welcome, Nikki. I'm happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. I mean, I think if I weren't, I'd probably be scrubbing my bathtub, which really needs it. I've been eyeing it, so.
Yeah, it's in the air. It's in the air.
It really is. Just looking around going, all those things I never do. I really should do them.
Right. Well, this is the time to do them. Well, can you tell us how you came to be interested in astrology?
Sure. So I think like most of us, I was quite interested in it as a kid. You know, when you're trying to figure out who you are, you kind of, or maybe it was just me, but I was looking for anything that could give me some guidance, some framework. And so I looked at astrology. And then, you know, this was some time ago, and I kind of got away from it. But then I came back to it more recently. There's been this whole wave of people being more interested in astrology and taking it more seriously, and it's just sort of part of our cultural lexicon in a way that it hadn't been when I was growing up. And I found it to be simultaneously more interesting and more informative, and then also more limiting in a way than I remembered it being. And so that's actually what brought me to this book, is I wanted to kind of figure out what I found useful in astrology and what I thought kids might, to sort of make it a little more accessible for them, and also help them understand that it's more complex than this is your sign, the end.
Mm-hmm. And there aren't too many books that are geared towards children. I remember one from probably 20 years or more ago by Amanda Owen, Your Lucky Stars, and it was her response to really stereotypical statements about signs that were, in some cases, kind of judgmental, and she wanted to open kids' eyes to wider possibilities. And you do take a 365 approach.
I know, it's a lot.
But no, you cover like all of the things, like here's stuff that's good and here's stuff that you might want to be careful with.
Yeah,
which is
just, operate with caution, sort of. But I completely agree that there's a lot of judgment in the sign. So I'm a Leo, and I feel like we get a really bad rap, and it took me a while to sort of embrace the parts of being a Leo that I felt good about, and the parts that, except the parts where I was like, I don't feel like I'm a drama queen. I'm an introvert. Like, what are you talking about? And then just sort of realize the ways in which I can be an introvert and a Leo at the same time.
Well, you could certainly be regal. I have seen some very quiet and proud Leo people before. Yeah.
That's true. And I don't like unsolicited advice.
So with the issue of addressing kids, I mean, you wrote for children with the junior, the book about magic. I have the title wrong. I'm sorry. Junior Witch's Handbook. Yeah. So you already had your toes in the water of how you put things towards kids, but also just looking at your whole library, you have a bent for explaining things, for making stuff that you like accessible to other people. Would that be kind of a common thread in your work?
I would say so. So actually, it's an interesting journey. I started off writing Practical Magic. I got kind of in trouble for this. So I found mostly it's very well received, but a couple of the negative reviews were like, it's too introductory, and then in one of them they're like, she's not even saying this stuff is absolutely true. And I was like, well, yeah. Like, back when I was writing it, I was more sort of curious and learning, and then sort of writing down what I was learning, and I describe it as being for like the Wicca curious, we're just sort of dipping a toe in. And then the more that I learned, the more I actually found that I loved and wanted to embrace. And so each book was sort of like, here's another aspect that I really have found valuable and want to share with other people.
So it's your own, well, that's kind of Leo. Here's my journey. My journey is informing what I'm telling you.
Here's me. Yes, it's true. It's very much like, this is what I'm doing. Don't you care?
I have 4 placements in Leo, so I will laugh with you. So when we factor in a younger audience, a couple of things about like that, the issue of addressing kids, how do you gear shift in your information or your approach to put it into something that a developing mind can wrap its brain around, or what?
No, honestly, not that much. So I have a daughter who is exactly the age that these are intended for. She's going to be turning 12 in December. And what I've learned is that, first of all, she's much smarter than I am. And she can grasp things much more quickly. So there's not really any need, like you said, junior astrologer, I threw it all in. Like, it's all in there. And it was because I really felt like kids could handle it. And there are some complicated concepts, but you can frame them in such a way that it applies to their lives. I think that's the only thing that that's different about my books for kids as opposed to my books for adults. They're framed within the context of what's going on in a kid's life.
And can you generally define what the target audience is for this in terms of age?
Sure. I'd say like 9 to 13.
9
thereabout.
to 13. Okay.
Yeah.
So preteen and just over the edge, so tween. Okay.
Yeah. The tweens. Yeah. And, kids always kind of want to read up. Actually, my biggest readership for Practical Magic is teenagers, which is pretty great, actually. It's because that's when I know I was like, I need to know all the magic things. And then I got away from it for a while when I decided I needed to be an adult. And then once I was an adult, I could go back to magic, which is where I always wanted to be in the first place.
And I have the feeling that all over the world, as people listen to this, they're just nodding as they hear you say that. So I do want to point out the approach of this book and the structure are both different than what I have encountered in any book, because it's not the normal cookbook, and it's also not the normal building blocks. Like, all right, these are signs, these are houses, these are planets. You immediately start with the notion of the 3 important elements of the sun, moon, and the rising sign. And yeah. That was so I'm just curious.
That was the thing. Yeah, that was because that was the thing that really made the difference for me in astrology. When I didn't have to, and maybe this is extremely Leo to say as well, but when I didn't have to be so limited by being a Leo, and I could allow the complex facets of the moon sign and the rising sign as well, that I was like, oh, that's how to be a full person. And so that's what I wanted to give my readers right off the bat.
So that's the introduction. Like, there's a lot more going on here, and you are more than what you're going to, if you look your birth date up online, you're more than that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have a quiz that the reader can take to see if you identify more with your sun or your rising or your moon. And I just want to tell you that I scored 16 on all three of mine.
So you're all of them. That's great.
Oh, yeah, right. All one big bundle. But and I also found it really interesting that in terms of in previous years, people have just nutted themselves up over how do you get information to people about how they figure things out, and you basically just say, ask your parents for the time, and then go look it up online. Like,
yeah, I'm not putting all this math in a book. Google it. I mean, it's a whole new world.
This readership is used to doing that. That's just, I mean, that's part of pitching it directly to them.
Yeah,
from the way
exactly.
I look at it.
For them, that's completely normal. They're like, oh, cool, I'll go type it into my phone. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and see what it says. Right. Okay, so we're going to take a brief break here, and then when we come back, we'll continue talking about how the book is structured and how it presents the information. So hang around, folks. We'll be back really soon.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again? empowermentunlimited.net. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. Today we're talking to Nikki Van De Kar, who is the author of the Junior Astrologers Handbook. And we were just talking about the approach that the book takes. And early on, after introducing the young readers to the concept of the triple threat of the sun, moon, and rising, you then immediately break it into managing aspects of your life, managing school, managing friends, managing family. Again, I'm guessing you're pitching this information to the framework and the mindset of the reader, right?
Exactly. I think about what I find useful, and I think that once you get into astrology, you want to know all the things about what works, why is it this way. I loved the way earlier in the show you described Saturn as the planet of adulting, and but why why is that way? But at the beginning, you're just like, okay, but how does this relate to me? And that's where I wanted to go. Like, what can this do for you? What is the practical part of astrology?
And so you again use the notion of a quiz. So how did you come up with doing that for getting the reader to pull them in? Is that a way to making them actually interact with the material?
A little bit. And then also I was thinking back to when I was young, and this is going to date me, but Sassy Magazine was like the best thing in the world. And they had all of these quizzes, and I just loved a quiz. I would take a quiz anytime, anywhere. And I was like, this is just a good way for, as you say, for people to feel engaged, feel like, how is this relevant to me? And what can I learn about myself at this time when you're really trying to figure that out? Like, who are you? Maybe this quiz will have the answer. And spoiler alert, my quizzes do not have the answers at all. They just mostly go, maybe this is something for you to consider. Because I don't think, as it turns out, that any of us can find out who we are from anything other than living our lives. But they'll learn that eventually.
So you also have this notion, I'm looking at managing school, strengthening your weaknesses. So you do, for each sign and in each area, introduce the notion of, there are some traits that may not be your friend. and
it's true. As parents, we all kind of want our kids to feel completely secure in who they are, and I can't pretend that I don't think that my kid is the most perfect human being on the planet. But, she's got some growth areas, and it's okay to acknowledge those, I think. And it's okay to help kids acknowledge them within themselves, too, and just accept, like, hey, it's okay to not be perfect. Here are some ways where, maybe I can just kind of keep an eye on that.
And that is a less judgy way of saying Virgos are nitpickers.
Right.
No,
hey,
honestly,
Virgo,
it's...
you're awesome. Maybe don't give your group project participants such a hard time.
Yeah, it's just the easier way of tipping people off to ways they could look at stuff. It's actually, psychologically, I think it's a good move. And I also, so something else you're not going to find in most astrology books, and definitely not in any intro ones that I have read, are meditations that also fit in with managing whatever the area is that you're talking about. Meditations for how you can take what your characteristics are and use them in school. Meditations for managing your friends. Meditations for managing family. I love this. Keep calm and look out for the good. Yeah, anybody who had any number of siblings could probably do that now. So what was the thinking behind this, and what's your goal with adding meditations to the budding astrology student here?
Again, I was just thinking about how can I be helpful to them, and how can I give them some tools that I did not have. I was a really, really anxious kid. I had, panic attacks and all that, the things that we struggle to manage as adults. I still struggled with them back then, even though they weren't such a big deal, but they felt like such a big deal. And that I kind of wanted to just gently offer some advice or, ways that, maybe they can cope, and also point out that these problems are normal. Friendships are going to go awry, and they're going to have some bad times. And boy, I remember those relationships being the most powerful and emotional relationships, I think, probably, accepting like my romantic partner, like my whole life. Friendships when you're a kid are everything.
And when you hit cross the bridge years from being a kid to being a teenager, the drama is so intense.
It's so hard. My daughter grew 2 inches since April, and she's growing internally at the same rate, and it just must be exhausting. I can't even I can remember it, but I can't fully process how you're changing, you're moving, your life is moving around you. You're trying to deal with school and friends and family, and who's this going to be, and what are you supposed to do now? And you're bored, and then you're overstimulated. It's wild. And so hopefully this can help them kind of slow down and reflect a little bit, and maybe you don't have to move quite so fast.
And again, the operative verb you're using is managing. So that conveys the notion of you can do something with this. Maybe you can't change it, but you can steer this.
Yeah. It's also meant to be empowering. You can't make your family or your friends or your teachers or anybody else do anything. That's an important lesson to learn right away. You have no control over what other people do, but you can control how you respond, and how you respond both internally, like what's your emotional response to what somebody else is doing, and then also how you react to them. And setting boundaries, and also setting boundaries for yourself. What are you allowed to do? What are what are you allowing yourself to do it, as far as trusting people, trusting yourself?
So two things are occurring to me. One of them is this is essentially a guide for living. Astrology is merely the vehicle for it, is what it's sounding like to me. Would that be somewhat accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. It's a guide to living with some, some sort of tips of astrology, and that's sort of the first half of the book. The second half of the book goes more into like the individual signs. But yeah, the first half is very much like, here's life. It's rough. Here's what astrology can do to help you a bit.
And so the second thing that occurred to me was I have a feeling some of my adult listeners are going to be ordering this book for themselves because I think some of these concepts could be useful even if you have put your crazy tween years way behind you. The last thing I want to touch on this section before we move on to the bulk of the book is the rather technical concept very early on of events to be aware of: Mercury retrograde, solar eclipse, and lunar eclipse.
It's true. Well, how do you talk about astrology without including that things change and the stars are moving and none of this is fixed, and we go through cycles and life goes through cycles, and the hardest part there was deciding like where do I draw the line? Like, do I want to get into like Neptune and all these further planets and cycles that last for years or decades? And I decided I thought that would be a little overwhelming for the younger audience, and that I should just stick with like right in close to home, so just the sun and the moon and Mercury.
And what's interesting is, since this audience has been brought up with just going straight to their phone or iPad or tablet or whatever, they probably have already run into the Mercury retrograde and eclipses are all over social media and the web.
Yeah.
So these are probably concepts that they've already had, going across their screen on a regular basis.
Yeah, for sure. But like, I would hear like, oh God, Mercury retrograde, without ever fully understanding what anyone meant by that. Like, they were like, oh, you missed my call? You didn't get my email? Mercury retrograde. And I was like, what? Why? And so I wanted to give them a little more than that, where, it's like, it's just about communication, and it just means that you need to double check things a little bit more.
You're just alerting them that there's more going on here than just these signs.
Exactly.
And then when we get to part 2 of the book, which is actually slightly more than half of the book, that's when you do talk about the signs. And again, interesting here, you give them people from history that they can have as someone to look toward, like, oh, I can learn about this person and see what I have in common with them.
Yeah.
Did you just kind of like randomly choose? I mean, you've got some rather unusual and interesting people in here for the famous people. I mean, famous Taurus, Adrian Rich, that I wasn't expecting.
I had a little fun with it, I'm not going to lie. It was mostly like, who do I want to include? And who do I want to hold, because that I'm curating it, right? And not everyone might agree with my choices, and there are certainly like, unlimited number of people that I could choose from. But I wanted to say, like, hey, like Ada Lovelace, this woman combines poetry and programming. How cool is that? And, it was so tempting. I couldn't not do Queen Elizabeth as a Virgo because I'm incapable. But I wanted to just kind of throw out some people that maybe they wouldn't be fully familiar with, while not having everybody be, So I have Da Vinci, I have, people that they would recognize, but also I wanted some people that maybe they wouldn't.
And they're all across the fields of endeavor. So, and they're across history too. So it isn't just, here's a celebrity. It's people that made contributions that are, like Sally Ride is a Gemini. I personally love that. That's really just amazing. You chose her.
I love
Yay.
her. Yeah. She's the best.
So the next thing that struck me as really quite a hoot and unusual, and I think we'll probably spend some time. You have crafts for each of the signs.
Well, I like to craft, and so I wanted to throw them in. Okay, so the reason I like to craft, and this is getting a little, woo-woo in the weeds there, is I think that when you do something with your hands, when you make something, it helps you connect with it in a way that just reading a book or talking about it doesn't. Like you've made something, you've participated in it, and that it's a way of celebrating and imprinting. So much of my magical practice is about making things. So that was the reasoning behind it, and I just had a lot of fun being like, what would a Taurus craft be? And what would a Virgo craft be? And just playing around with that.
Well, can we talk about some of the crafts?
Yeah.
All right. So the Aries craft, actually this makes all the sense of the world. Making a candle.
Exactly. I think of all the fire signs, Aries is the most fiery. So Aries got the fire. And, candle making is quite simple. It's straightforward, and it happens quickly, and it's really satisfying, which I think also matches Aries. Aries is not necessarily going to want to do this project that will take, forever to come out. And here, you can make a candle in, an hour.
Yeah, and for some Aries, even that would take too long. And then you set fire to it, which is what will be the most pleasurable part of it. Yeah, the best. Okay, so for Taurus, illustration.
So my mom is a Taurus. Yeah, and I think that one thing that goes kind of unrecognized with Tauruses is that, they're very stubborn and you got to do things their way, but they're also incredibly artistic and value beauty so much. And so that's what I wanted to do, was sort of inspire Taurus creativity. I didn't want to lean into, I'm sure there's a stubborn craft I could come up with, but I wanted to lean into sort of that aspect of it for Taurus.
It wasn't like grow a plant or something, but
or
bake.
Or bake, yeah exactly. Yeah. I wanted to do something a little, maybe it's not quite as earthy, but just kind of help them explore their creativity.
And use their hands and create something visual.
Yeah.
That they could then look at and go, I made this. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. How did you come up with earrings for Gemini? Because they need to be two? Because you need a pair?
They need to be two, basically. And because you could make them, so many people make earrings, obviously, that are matching. And I thought for Gemini, it could be cool to make them a little different. Have one side be like a complement of the other one, and then the feathers made sense, for air and that kind of thing. I also think they're really fun and funky, which is a very Gemini kind of look.
Oh, I agree completely. And then Worry Stone for Cancer. I almost laughed out loud when I saw that.
I know. That one might have been a little too on the nose, but I thought it would be useful. My husband's a Cancer, and if he got a tattoo, it would say, this too shall pass.
Okay. And then one more, and then we'll take a break. A sun catcher for Leo. Now, I've heard of dream catchers, but not a sun catcher.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I wanted to play on a little bit. Leo and sun, we don't, we're a sun-worshipping group, and I thought that some way to bring that in, but I didn't want to do like, you draw a sun or you make a sort of thing. I wanted to have it be a little more of a metaphor, and again, to bring in, like, I know that I, as a Leo, am very much like, here are my things that I think are pretty, and I want to look at them. And I've thought that, creating a sun catcher out of beautiful things that, are there to look at and that draw the sun in, was kind of a spell, actually, for Leo.
So hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back very soon. Thanks. How would you like navigational tools you can use on your own? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and click the Shop tab. There you'll find lots of talks and guides explaining the big influences at work now, like Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. You'll also find a variety of guided visualizations for relaxing, clearing your energy, or getting to know planetary archetypes. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We are talking to the author of the Junior Astrologers Handbook, Nikki Van De Kar. And right before the break, we were going through the crafts in the book for each sign, and we had just gotten to Leo, which is actually using a hoop to make a sun-shaped object that you can stick in your window and have the sun shine through. How did you settle on the craft for Virgo? Because it seems there could be so many body care products that would be appropriate.
It's true. I decided that, yes, got to have a body care, but I also thought about how Virgos are so good at kind of speaking and communication, and that was what I wanted to bring out. And so for me, that could have gone somewhere like a necklace around sort of the throat chakra, but I decided to go with lip balm.
Lip balm. And then for Libra, you have a tie-dye shirt. Using Kool-Aid for the dye. I like that idea.
Yeah, I used to do that with yarn a lot for knitting. Kool-Aid is a wonderful dye. It's, it's non-toxic. You can get it right there. You don't have to order anything, and it comes in a big variety of colors. It's really fun.
Then the one for Scorpio I thought was a great surprise, and that is extracting DNA from a strawberry.
That one was, it's not really a craft necessarily. You're not going to hang on to the strawberry DNA, but for, our intense, thoughtful Scorpios who just want to figure out how everything works, I thought that would be a really cool one.
And then for Sagittarius, you have a vision board, which I think pretty much everybody is familiar with. That'd be cool for a kid to do. Capricorn, clay pot. Interesting. Not Taurus. Yeah.
Again, it's true. You would think that that would make the most sense for Taurus, but again, I just kind of wanted to push back against some of our assumptions about Taurus. And I did think that Capricorn would want something practical, and definitely grounded.
And how did you come up with soap for Aquarius? This Aquarius asks.
Well, it really could have gone with Pisces for sure, because my Pisces friend, I can never get her out of the bath. But she's. So I went with body scrub for Pisces because, like to be getting themselves all beautiful. I think really for soap, it was less about water and more about making a clean start. Like I think about sort of the airy, going with the flow kind of new beginnings of Aquarius, and how you just kind of occasionally want to say, all right, well, I'm done with that, and I'm moving on to the next thing. And I, sort of wash my hands of that, and I'm going on to something else.
Metaphor. Okay. I was thinking more like science project, but that works fine too.
Yeah.
Now, jumping ahead quickly, with each sign, you also introduce a technical aspect that is frequently not put in beginning books, which is the concept of decanates or decans, that each sign is split into 3 parts. What was the thinking behind putting something
That was
that
a leap,
technical
I
in?
know. I didn't put houses in, I put decans in. Again, the thinking was the same as it was, with leading off with you're not just one sign, you're 3 signs. You're your rising sign and your moon sign just as much as you are your sun sign. I wanted to break it down even more and say, actually, astrology is even more complicated than that. You get to be even more complicated than that. And you get to there's an aspect of choice that I have in this book where it's sort of like you get to choose what aspects of your sign you want to lean into and which ones that, maybe you're just like, that's not really me. And so, yeah, I just wanted to allow kids to be complicated.
And again, going into the spectrum of possibilities for every sign, you split it into aspects of the self to celebrate and aspects of the self to use with caution.
Yep. We all have our things that we're working on, and we can't get better about them unless we are first aware of them and accept them. So just some red flags that you might want to look out for. That was my only goal there. I certainly didn't want to be telling anyone that they are bad or wrong, or here's something that you aren't good at or anything like that. The idea was more, you don't have to be perfect, and everybody has issues, and here, does this ring true? And if so, okay, cool. That's now that you can work on it.
And you take the notion of the events to look out for that you had in the first part, and it seems to be split more fine-tuned in each sign with events to watch out for and events to look forward to, and these categories are tailored to each sign. It's not just across the board. Yeah.
That was interesting. That was probably where I got the most creative with how I thought each sign might react to a certain thing. So, for some signs, having the moon around is great. For other signs, maybe it doesn't feel so good for them, and so that was interesting. I felt a little nervous about it, I'll be honest, because I was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just kind of bringing, my own interpretation and my own instincts here. But I also thought that it could be helpful. Like, that's another way where I find astrology to be really practical. Hey, the moon is here. Okay, I'm ready. For good or evil, I'm prepared for this.
And this is where you weave in the notion of the other bodies, because, for example, I've got the book open to Libra right now, and you talk about Mars being in Libra and Jupiter being in Libra, and then you talk about Mercury and Venus and Saturn being in Libra as things you might like. And it varies by sign, but you do point out the role of bodies in the sky and when they end up there. Yeah.
And again, they have to do all the Googling themselves. I'm not going into, just the charts and everything like that, because it's so much easier to just look it up.
And they're used to it. It's what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this just dovetails right into the way they're already approaching things. And you also slipped in, and this is under the Decan information, potential careers. Well, there's a thought to put in the brain of a tween.
I know. It's a little early. But that was what I always wanted to know. Like, and people do. They ask kids from when they're 5, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they, my daughter's gone through 8, 9, 50 potential careers, but I was just thinking about, here, maybe just some ideas that it doesn't have to be like you're choosing right now and you're on your path and there you are until the end of time. But just throwing some ideas out there.
Did you have a market research? Did you have a test market
No.
with your daughter and her friends and run this by them or anything?
You know what? She's actually not allowed to read them until I'm done. Like, she doesn't get to see the books until they come out, and they're like, she can hold them in her hands. But I do pull her aside and I go, okay, what do you think about this? Okay, if you were going to have a conversation with your best friend about something, what would you guys talk about? And hey, do you think this would be cool? But she's actually not allowed to contribute any further than that because I think I would lose track of the book entirely. it would go in some. She's a Sagittarius, so it would go in some incredibly fantastical and imaginative direction, and I'd be like, oh, I can't follow you down there. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. But did she make crafts with you to test the crafts?
Oh yes, always. We've made candles, and we made we did lots of drawings. The sun catcher we actually made years and years and years ago. So that was fun, and we've done tie dye, all of that.
So this is a way that a parent might be able to engage with a child by both reading this book and working through some of the things in it.
Absolutely. We didn't talk about this that much, but one of the sections of, managing their lives is managing family. And if this past year has taught me anything, so, we live in the village, far away from anything. And, during quarantine, it was really just the three of us in our house. And we had to come up with ways to fill the time. And a lot of that was, let's do something together. Let's make something. We'll just go make something. And that it's such a good way to have some context for spending time together so that you're not just going, what do you want to talk about? or something like that. And you're not both on your phones, but you are connecting, and you come out on the other side of it with something that you made together, and that feels really good.
I absolutely relate to that because my mother was an art teacher, and we had buckets of sand in the garage, and we'd make it wet and poke our fingers in it and make weird shapes and pour wax in it and then stick the wicks in it. And then we also did tie-dye, we did painting, we did all kinds of stuff. So
that's great.
Yep. Sometimes friends would be invited over to partake, but mostly they just kept far away from the weirdos. But I'm straying from our point. So that I'm seeing that I could see a parent giving this book to a kid and then, overnight picking it up and flipping through it and going, oh, this is interesting, and seeing new aspects about themselves and maybe getting some revisionist retrospective look at what was going on with you when you were a tween.
Yeah, and it might help you connect to your kid now. Even though we were all there, it's hard to remember, and it's hard to put ourselves back into it when relationships get a little challenging, let's say. And boundaries get pushed.
Mm-hmm. And when the pre-adolescent kids are running around having high-level drama and the world is ending. So that's my memory of being that age.
I loved it. Every time the world was ending, I could have like a big dramatic cry. And the other thing is that everything in my books for kids is not dumbed down. It's framed to be a applicable to their lives. So, you can take some of the advice I give on school and put it toward work. Advice on friends I still need now, probably even more than I did then. But everything in here is just as valuable for an adult as it is for a kid, to be honest.
Excuse me. And might I say, excuse me, what a great time to have this happen. It is a beautiful book. Can you talk about what it looks like?
Thank you, yes. So the cover is this amazingly sort of retro lettering, sort of like 50s, sort of B-movie alien kind of thing, which I love so much. And it's got these kids just looking out at the stars, and the artwork is very just whimsical and light, and the illustrator, Uta Krogman, is just fantastic. She illustrated the Junior Witch's Handbook as well, and they're very gentle and vibrant, and representative illustrations. So they're not super dreamy. They're just kind of like, I am a kid. Here's life. It's great.
I think it's very, very fun.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about my sinuses deciding to do this. Can you tell people
no.
where they can find you?
Yes, of course. So the books are available, wherever books are sold. Your local bookstore, Amazon, all the places. And you can find me at NikkiVanDeKar.com. That's NikkiVanDeCar. And I'm also on Instagram. That's probably my most active social media place.
Increasingly for so many people. Well, I thank you so much for talking to us today. And I'm loving this book, and I know what budding junior astrologer I am going to give this to.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I have someone I've known since she was a child who has a child who's always sending questions through her to my Patreon. So he will not get this.
That's great. That's
so
perfect.
Thank you very much for being here. And this is Kathy Beal. You can find me at empowermentunlimited.net. And talk to you again in 2 weeks.